I was 53 years old when I finally allowed myself to believe that life wasn't done surprising me. Not in the small, forgettable ways, like finding a dollar in an old jacket or hearing your favorite song at the grocery store, but in the kind of way that rewrites your entire future. The kind that makes you sit a little straighter, breathe a little deeper, and dare to hope again, even when you've spent years training yourself not to. Her name was Emily. And the night she told me I was going to be a father, I swear something inside my chest, something I thought had died years ago, came back to life. It started on a quiet Thursday evening. Rain tapped softly against the windows of our suburban Chicago home, the kind of steady, rhythmic drizzle that makes the world feel smaller, more intimate. Emily stood in the doorway of the living room, her hands trembling slightly, her eyes glistening under the soft amber glow of the floor lamp. "Can we talk?" she asked. There was something in her voice, not fear exactly, but weight, like she was carrying something too big for her hands. I muted the TV and turned toward her, my heart already picking up speed. Of course. She walked toward me slowly, like each step mattered, like each step might change everything. Then she stopped, right in front of me. And for a second, she just looked at me. Really looked at me. "I went to the doctor today," she said. My mind raced. At our age, those words never meant something light. My stomach tightened. "Is everything okay?" I asked, already bracing myself. She let out a shaky breath. Then she smiled. And everything shifted. "I'm pregnant." I didn't react right away. Not because I didn't understand what she said, but because my brain refused to process it. The words just hung there in the air, surreal, impossible. Pregnant. At 53, you don't expect life to begin again. You expect things to wind down, to settle, to become predictable. But this was chaos. Beautiful, terrifying chaos. "Say that again," I whispered. Emily laughed softly, tears forming in her eyes. "I'm pregnant." And just like that, I broke. A sound escaped me, something between a laugh and a sob, as I stood up and pulled her into my arms. I held her tighter than I had ever held anything in my life. "You're serious?" I asked into her shoulder. "Yes," she said, her voice warm and certain. "I took 3 tests, and the doctor confirmed it." I pulled back, my hands on her face, searching her eyes for even the smallest hint of doubt. There was none. Only warmth. Only certainty. Only hope. "I'm going to be a father," I said, almost to myself. The words felt foreign, unreal. But God's, they felt good. I hadn't always been alone. There was a time, years ago, when I thought I had everything figured out, a marriage that seemed stable, a future that looked normal. But life has a way of quietly unraveling things you once believed were permanent. My ex-wife, Laura, and I tried for children for years. Doctor visits, tests, procedures, silent car rides home filled with disappointment we didn't know how to talk about. Eventually, the conversation stopped. Then the laughter stopped. And one day, without any dramatic explosion, the marriage just ended. She moved on. Had kids with someone else. And I told myself I was okay with it. That some men just weren't meant to be fathers. That maybe my role in life was something else. Work stability, quiet evenings. A life without chaos. Without laughter echoing down hallways. Without tiny footsteps. Without someone calling me dad. Then Emily came into my life like a soft kind of storm. She wasn't loud, she wasn't dramatic. But she changed everything just by being there. We met at a mutual friend's dinner, one of those awkward gatherings where no one really wants to be the first to leave. She sat across from me, listening more than she spoke, her smile subtle but genuine. There was something about her. Something calming. We started talking. Then we kept talking. And before I knew it, silence didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt shared. Comfortable. Like we had both lived enough life to understand what really mattered. She knew about my past, about the failed marriage, about the years of trying and failing to have a child. And she never pushed. Never made promises. Never filled my head with false hope. Which is why, when she stood there in our living room, telling me she was pregnant. I believed her without question. The next few weeks felt like a dream I was afraid to wake up from. I found myself smiling for no reason, catching my reflection and barely recognizing the man looking back at me. I had purpose again. Every morning felt different. Lighter. Like the world had quietly shifted in my favor after decades of indifference. I started making plans. Real plans. Not the vague, distant kind, but detailed, tangible ones. I cleared out the spare room. The one that had been sitting untouched for years, collecting dust and forgotten intentions. I stood in the middle of it one afternoon, hands on my hips, imagining it transformed. A crib in the corner. Soft light. Walls painted in something warm. Safe. A place where something new could begin. "Are you really doing this already?" Emily asked one evening, leaning against the doorway with a soft smile. I was holding a measuring tape, crouched on the floor, completely focused. "We're already behind," I said, half joking, half serious. She laughed. "I'm only a few weeks in." "And I've already waited 53 years, I replied, glancing up at her. That made her pause. Her smile softened into something quieter. More complicated. But I didn't notice it then. I was too caught up in the future. The crib took me 3 days to build. Not because it was complicated, but because I refused to rush it. Every screw tightened carefully. Every piece aligned perfectly. I wanted it to be right. Perfect. Because this wasn't just furniture. This was proof. Proof that life had given me one more chance. The final night, I sat on the floor, staring at it, running my hand along the smooth wood, imagining a tiny hand gripping the rails, imagining soft breathing in the dark, imagining. "Do you ever think?" Emily's voice cut through my thoughts. I turned to see her standing in the doorway again, her arms wrapped around herself. "Think what?" I asked gently. She hesitated, then forced a small smile. "Nothing, it's just a lot." I stood up and walked over to her, placing my hands on her shoulders. "We'll figure it out," I said, "together." She nodded. But her eyes, for just a second, there was something there. Something I couldn't quite place. Something that didn't match the happiness I felt. That night, I lay awake longer than usual, staring at the ceiling, listening to the quiet hum of the house. Emily slept beside me, her breathing slow and steady. Everything should have felt perfect. And yet, there was a small, almost invisible crack forming somewhere deep inside my chest. A feeling I couldn't explain. A question I didn't know how to ask. I turned my head slightly, looking at her in the dim light. "Hey," I whispered softly. She didn't respond. She was already asleep. Or at least, that's what I thought. Because the next morning, everything began to change. The next morning didn't arrive with chaos. There were no slammed doors, no shouting, no sudden, dramatic revelation. Just quiet. The kind of quiet that feels wrong. I woke up before Emily, which wasn't unusual. Years of routine had trained my body to rise early, even on weekends. The house still held that soft, bluish light of dawn, where everything feels suspended between night and day. For a moment, I just lay there, listening, breathing, letting the reality settle in again. I'm going to be a father. Even thinking it felt surreal, dangerous almost, like if I held onto it too tightly, it might disappear. Carefully, I slipped out of bed, making sure not to wake her. She shifted slightly, turning onto her side, her back now facing me. Her hand rested lightly on her stomach. That small, unconscious gesture sent a warmth through my chest. I smiled. In the kitchen, I made coffee the way I always did, black, no sugar. But today, everything felt different. Even the sound of the machine seemed sharper, more alive. I stood by the window, mug in hand, watching the empty street. And for the first time in years, I imagined a future that extended beyond myself. School runs, birthday parties, tiny shoes by the door, late-night fevers, laughter echoing through the house. Chaos, beautiful, exhausting chaos. I wanted all of it. Every second. Good morning. Her voice startled me slightly. I turned to see Emily standing at the entrance of the kitchen, wrapped in one of my old shirts. Her hair was messy, her face bare, and somehow she had never looked more real to me. Morning, I said, smiling. You should be resting. She shrugged, walking over slowly. I feel fine. There it was again. That word. Fine. It lingered a second too long. I poured her a glass of water instead of coffee. Doctor said no caffeine, right? I teased gently. She gave a small smile. You're already in full dad mode. Too much? I asked. No, she said quickly. Then softer, almost to herself, not at all. We sat at the table together. But something had shifted. Not enough to name it. Not enough to confront it. But enough to feel it. Conversations didn't flow the same way. There were pauses where there hadn't been before. Moments where she seemed somewhere else entirely, even while sitting right across from me. I told myself it was normal. Hormones, stress, adjustment. At our age, this wasn't just life-changing, it was life-rewriting. Of course she'd feel overwhelmed. So I ignored the small voice in my head. The one that whispered, something's off. Later that afternoon, I decided to run a few errands. Pick up paint samples. Look at baby stores. Say it out loud enough times, and maybe it would finally feel real. Baby stores. At 53. I almost laughed just thinking about it. The store smelled like powder and plastic, and something faintly sweet. I stood there for a moment, just taking it all in. Rows of tiny clothes. Miniature socks. Bottles, toys, strollers. Entire lives contained in pastel colors and soft edges. A young couple stood a few feet away from me, arguing softly over stroller brands. They looked nervous, excited, unprepared. I recognized that feeling. But unlike them, I didn't feel unprepared. I felt late. Like I had missed the train years ago and somehow, it had come back for me. Can I help you? The saleswoman smiled politely. I hesitated. Then said it. I'm going to be a father. Even now, saying it out loud made my chest tight. Her face lit up. Congratulations. Thank you, I said, almost breathless. First child. Yes. She started guiding me through products, talking about safety ratings and materials and brands, but I barely heard her. Because in my mind, I was already home. Already in that spare room. Already building a life that, for years, I thought I'd never have. I bought more than I planned. Paint samples, a small mobile, even a tiny pair of socks I couldn't stop staring at. Ridiculous, maybe. But I didn't care. For once in my life. I didn't care about being rational. When I got home, the house felt empty. Too quiet. Emily, I called out. No answer. I set the bags down slowly. A strange feeling settled in my stomach. Not panic. Not yet. Just unease. I found her upstairs. In the bedroom. Sitting on the edge of the bed. Her back was to the door. Her shoulders slightly hunched. Hey, I said gently. She didn't turn right away. Then slowly, she looked over her shoulder. And my heart dropped. Her eyes were red. Not just tired. Cried out. What happened? I asked, stepping closer. Nothing, she said quickly, wiping her face. I'm just emotional. I nodded slowly. Hormones. That word again. The easy explanation. The safe one. I sat beside her, placing a hand gently on her back. We don't have to do everything at once, I said softly. We can take this one step at a time. She let out a shaky breath. I know. But her voice didn't sound convinced. I went to the store, I added, trying to lighten the mood. You wouldn't believe how small baby socks are. That earned a faint smile. Did you buy some? Maybe. She laughed quietly. And for a brief moment, it felt normal again. But then, her phone buzzed. Just once. A message. She froze. Not dramatically. Not obviously. But enough. Her eyes flicked to the phone on the nightstand. Then back to me. Too quickly. Are you going to check it? I asked casually. She shook her head. It's nothing. Nothing. Again. I didn't push. I wanted to trust her. Needed to. Because if I didn't, everything I had just started building would collapse before it even began. That night, things felt heavier. Dinner was quieter. The spaces between words stretched longer. And even when we sat close, it felt like there was something invisible between us. Something growing. Something neither of us was ready to name. Later in bed, she turned away from me again. Facing the wall. Her body tense. Not asleep. Just distant. Emily, I said quietly. No response. Are you okay? A pause. Then, yeah, I'm just tired. I stared at the ceiling again. That same crack in my chest. It was getting bigger. And sometime after midnight, I heard it. Soft. Barely there. The sound of her phone lighting up again. A message. Then another. And another. I turned my head slightly. She was awake. I could tell by the way her breathing changed. Careful. Controlled. Like she didn't want me to know. The glow of the screen reflected faintly against the wall. And for a second, just a second, I saw her expression. Tense. Afraid. Guilty. That's when the thought hit me. Sharp. Unwelcome. Impossible. What if this isn't what I think it is? I closed my eyes. Tried to push it away. Tried to hold onto the version of reality I had built over the past few weeks. The crib. The future. The words dad. But deep down, something had already started to break. And I didn't know yet that the truth was going to destroy everything. I didn't confront her the next morning. That's the part people don't understand when they hear stories like this. They think there's always a moment where everything explodes, where the suspicion turns into accusation, where voices rise and truth spills out all at once. But real life stretches the pain. It lets it breathe. It makes you sit with it long enough for it to sink its claws into you. I acted normal. Or at least I tried to. I made coffee. Asked her how she slept. Kissed her on the cheek before she left the room. All the things a man does when he's trying desperately to preserve something that might already be gone. But inside, everything had shifted. Every word she said. Every glance. Every silence. It all felt different now. Measured. Questionable. Unstable. You're up early again, she said, walking into the kitchen. Her tone was light. Too light. Couldn't sleep, I replied. Excited, she asked with a small smile. I looked at her. Really looked at her. And for the first time since she told me, I didn't see certainty. I saw effort. I guess, I said quietly. She poured herself water again. Still no coffee. Still playing the role. That thought hit me harder than I expected. Playing the role. God. I hated myself for even thinking it. Do you have plans today? She asked. Not really, I said. Might work on the room. Her body stiffened slightly. You don't have to rush that, she said. I know, I replied. I just want to. She nodded, but didn't look at me. After she left, I stood in the kitchen for a long time. Not moving. Not thinking clearly. Just existing in that strange space between denial and realization. Then I did something I never thought I would do. Something I used to judge other people for. Something that felt beneath me. I checked her phone. It was still on the nightstand. She must have forgotten it. Or maybe she didn't. Maybe some part of her wanted this to come out. My hands hesitated. Hovered over it. This was the line. The point of no return. Because once you see something, you can't unsee it. Once trust cracks, it never sounds the same again. But the image from last night, her face in that dim glow. That wasn't nothing. So I picked it up. The screen lit instantly. No password. No barrier. Just access. And somehow that made it worse. The messages were right there. At the top. Unread. From a name I didn't recognize. Daniel. My chest tightened. I told myself it could be anyone. A coworker. A friend. A mistake. I opened the thread. The first message I saw wasn't even from last night. It was from 2 weeks ago. Daniel. Did you tell him yet? My fingers went cold. I scrolled. Slowly. Carefully. Like I was handling something fragile. Something that could shatter me if I moved too fast. Emily. Not yet, I need time. Time. For what? Another message. Daniel. You can't keep dragging this out, it's not fair to him. My heart started pounding now. Louder. Faster. Drowning everything else out. I kept reading. Even though every instinct told me to stop. Emily. I know, I see how happy he is. I didn't expect that. I felt something inside me twist. Violently. Daniel. That doesn't change anything, you know the truth. The truth. My vision blurred slightly. But I kept going. Because now, I needed to know. Emily. I thought I could do this. I thought maybe it wouldn't matter. Wouldn't matter. Daniel. It does matter, that's my child. Everything stopped. Not slowed. Not cracked. Stopped. Like the world had been ripped out from under me. My grip tightened around the phone. My knuckles turning white. No. No, no, no. I scrolled again. Desperate. Praying I misunderstood. Emily. Lower your voice, he might hear you. Daniel. He deserves to know he's building a life on a lie. A lie. I dropped the phone onto the bed like it burned me. Stepped back. Shaking my head. No. The word came out under my breath. Weak. Pathetic. This wasn't real. It couldn't be. The crib. The room. Her smile. The way she looked at me. It was all real. It had to be. But those messages. They didn't lie. I ran a hand through my hair, pacing the room now. Trying to breathe. Trying to think. Trying to hold onto something. Anything that made sense. That's my child. The words echoed. Over. And over. And over again. At 53. After years of believing I'd never be a father. After finally letting myself hope. She let me believe it was mine. She watched me build that crib. Watched me plan. Watched me come alive again. And said nothing. A sound escaped me then. Low. Broken. Something I didn't recognize as my own voice. I turned toward the doorway. Half expecting her to be standing there. To tell me this was all some horrible misunderstanding. But the hallway was empty. Of course it was. I looked back at the phone. Still lying on the bed. Still open. Still full of truth I wasn't ready to face. And in that moment, something inside me changed. Not shattered. Not completely. But hardened. Because the pain. That was immediate. Sharp. Unforgiving. But beneath it, something colder started to form. A realization. A quiet, dangerous kind of clarity. She didn't just lie to me. She used me. Used my past. My pain. My one weakness. The one thing I had spent years grieving. Fatherhood. And suddenly, the man who had been carefully building a future started thinking about something else entirely. Not hope. Not dreams. But truth. And what I was going to do with it. Because one thing was certain now. I wasn't going to confront her. Not yet. If she could lie to my face this easily. then I needed to know everything. Every detail. Every truth she thought she could hide. And when the time came, I wasn't going to be the man she thought I was. I was going to be the man she never saw coming. I didn't confront her. Not that day. Not the next one either. Because once the truth is in your hands, raw and undeniable, you realize something most people never think about. Timing is power. I went back to the crib that evening. Sat on the floor like I had the night I finished building it. Ran my hand along the wood again. But this time, I didn't imagine tiny fingers gripping the rails. I imagined her watching me build it. Knowing. The entire time. "You're quiet," Emily said softly from the doorway. I didn't turn immediately. "Just thinking," I replied. She stepped into the room slowly, her eyes scanning everything, the crib, the walls, the small mobile I had already hung. "You've done so much already," she said. Her voice, it almost sounded sad. "Almost." "For us," I said. Finally, I looked at her. Held her gaze. And for a split second, something flickered across her face. Fear. It was gone just as quickly. Replaced with that same careful expression I'd started to notice. Controlled. Measured. "You don't have to carry all of this alone," she said. I almost laughed. "Alone?" "I'm not," I replied calmly. "We're in this together, right?" There it was again. That pause. That barely noticeable hesitation. "Right," she said. I nodded slowly. As if I believed her. As if everything was still intact. That night I didn't sleep. Not really. I lay there, staring into the darkness, listening to her breathing beside me. Counting the seconds between each inhale. Each exhale. Trying to match them. Trying to understand how someone could lie so quietly. So consistently. The next morning, I made a decision. If I was going to tear this apart, I needed proof. Not suspicion. Not emotion. Proof. So I called in a favor. Years ago, before my life settled into routines and quiet evenings, I had a friend, Mark. We didn't talk often anymore, but some connections don't fade completely. Especially not the kind built on shared history. He worked in private investigations now. The kind of job that lives in the shadows. The kind of job that finds truth when people try to bury it. When he picked up, his voice carried that same rough edge I remembered. "Been a while," he said. "Yeah," I replied. "I need your help." There was a pause. Not hesitation. Recognition. What kind of help? I stared out the window. Watched Emily's car disappear down the street. And said the words that made everything real. "I think my wife is lying to me." 2 days. That's all it took. 2 days for my entire life to rearrange itself into something unrecognizable. Mark didn't waste time. He didn't ask unnecessary questions. He just listened. Then he worked. When he called me back, his tone had changed. Less casual. More careful. "You sitting down?" he asked. I already was. In the same chair. In the same room. Surrounded by the same things that suddenly felt like they belonged to someone else. "Yeah," I said. There was a brief silence. Then, "She's been seeing him for at least 4 months." I closed my eyes. 4 months. That meant before the pregnancy. Before the announcement. Before the smiles. "His name's Daniel Carter," Mark continued. "Mid-30s, works in real estate, divorced, no kids." I let out a slow breath. Daniel. Now he had a last name. A face I hadn't even seen yet. But I could already picture him. Younger. Confident. Everything I wasn't anymore. "They've been meeting regularly," Mark said. "Hotels, his apartment, sometimes during the day while you're at work." Each word landed like a weight. Heavy. Precise. "And the pregnancy?" I asked, my voice barely steady. Another pause. Longer this time. Based on timing, it's almost definitely his. Almost definitely. I nodded slowly, even though he couldn't see me. "Send me everything," I said. When the file came through, I didn't open it right away. I just stared at it. That small digital folder. Containing everything I needed to destroy the illusion I had been living in. Eventually, I clicked. Photos. Dates. Locations. Messages. There she was. Emily. Smiling. Laughing. Touching him the same way she touched me. Looking at him. The way I thought she only looked at me. And him. Daniel. Younger like I imagined. Arm around her. Comfortable. Familiar. Not a mistake. Not confusion. A choice. I closed the file. Sat back. Stared at the ceiling. And something inside me went completely still. No more denial. No more questions. Just truth. That evening, when Emily came home, I greeted her with a smile. "How was your day?" I asked. "Good," she said. "Busy." "Yeah," I nodded. "Same here." We ate dinner together. Talked about nothing. Absolutely nothing. Like two people pretending to live inside a normal life. But inside, I was already somewhere else. Planning. Watching. Waiting. Because I didn't want a messy confrontation. I didn't want tears and excuses and half-truths. I wanted clarity. Final. Unavoidable. So I made a plan. "Hey," I said casually, setting my fork down, "we should celebrate." She looked up. "Celebrate?" "Yeah," I smiled. "The baby, us, this new chapter." Her expression froze for just a second. Then softened. "That sounds nice." "Friday night," I said. "I'll plan everything." She nodded. But I saw it. That flicker again. That uncertainty. Good. Because by Friday night, everything would be different. That night, after she fell asleep, I got out of bed quietly, walked down the hallway, and stood in the doorway of that room. The crib sat there. Perfect. Silent. Waiting. I stepped inside slowly. Ran my hand along it one last time. Not with hope this time. With understanding. "This was never for me," I whispered. And then, I turned off the light, closed the door, and prepared to burn the lie to the ground. Friday night arrived with a kind of calm that didn't feel real. Not the peaceful kind. The kind that settles over everything just before something breaks. I spent the entire day preparing. Not rushing, not hesitating. Every detail mattered. Because this wasn't just a dinner. This was the end. I cleaned the house top to bottom. Set the table with the good plates, the ones we only used for special occasions. Candles, soft lighting, wine breathing on the counter. Everything looked warm. Inviting. Perfect. The crib stayed exactly where it was. In the next room. Door slightly open. Visible but not obvious. When Emily came downstairs that evening, she paused at the sight of it all. "You did all this?" she asked softly. I turned, offering a small smile, figured it deserved something special. Her eyes scanned the room, then landed on me. There was something there. Not happiness. Not entirely. Something closer to dread. "You look beautiful," I said. She did. Simple dress, hair pulled back, just enough effort to show she cared. That used to mean everything to me. "Thank you," she replied, her voice quieter than usual. We sat down together. The candles flickered gently between us. For a moment, it almost felt like the life I thought I had. We talked. Light things. Safe things. Movies, work, random memories. She laughed once or twice, but it never reached her eyes. I poured her wine. She hesitated, then took it. "Are you sure?" I asked gently. She gave a small, nervous smile. "One glass won't hurt." I nodded. Watched her take a sip. Watched her pretend everything was normal. I let the silence stretch. Just enough. Then I leaned back slightly. "And how is Daniel?" I asked. The glass slipped from her hand. Not dramatically. Just enough to hit the table hard and spill across the surface. "What?" she whispered. I held her gaze. "Calm. Steady. Unmoving." "Daniel," I repeated, mid-30s, real estate, divorced. Her face drained of color. I don't know what you're talking about," she said quickly. "Too quickly." I nodded slowly, reached beside me, and placed the folder on the table. She stared at it like it might explode. "You should," I said quietly. "It's all in there." For a long moment, neither of us moved. Then, with trembling hands, she opened it. Photo by photo. Page by page. I watched her break. Not loudly. Not dramatically. But piece by piece. Her breathing changed first. Then her hands. Then her eyes. By the time she reached the end, she couldn't look at me anymore. "I was going to tell you," she whispered. I let out a quiet breath. "I know." That surprised her. She looked up. Confused. "I saw the messages," I said. Her lips parted slightly. No words came out. "How long?" I asked. She swallowed. 4 months. I nodded once. "Before or after you found out you were pregnant?" Silence. "Emily." "Before," she said, her voice breaking. Of course it was. I leaned forward slightly, resting my arms on the table. "So let me understand this," I said calmly. "You were seeing him, you got pregnant, you knew it wasn't mine." Tears started falling now. She didn't wipe them. "And you still let me believe," I paused, my voice tightening for the first time, "that I was finally going to be a father." "I didn't mean to hurt you," she said, shaking her head. I almost smiled. Not because it was funny. Because it was unbelievable. "You didn't mean to," I repeated softly. "I thought maybe it wouldn't matter," she said through tears. "You wanted it so much. I saw how happy you were and I couldn't take it away from you." There it was. The justification. "You didn't want to take it away," I said slowly, "so you let me build a life on something that wasn't real." "I was going to fix it," she whispered. "Fix it?" I asked. She nodded weakly. "I thought maybe I could make it work, that you'd never find out." That landed harder than anything else. Not the affair. Not the lies. That you'd never find out. I leaned back in my chair. Looked at her. Really looked at her. And for the first time since all of this started, I felt nothing. No anger. No heartbreak. Just clarity. "You don't love me," I said quietly. She shook her head immediately. "No, I do." "Stop," I cut in. She froze. "Don't lie again," I said. "Not now." Silence filled the space between us. Heavy. Final. "I loved you," I continued, in a way I didn't think I could anymore. Her shoulders started shaking. "But what you did," I glanced toward the hallway, toward that room, "that wasn't just betrayal." I paused. Let the weight of it settle. "That was cruelty." She broke then, crying openly now. But it didn't move me. Not anymore. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry." I nodded slowly. "I believe you." She looked up, hope flickering for a split second. And then, I stood. That hope disappeared instantly. "I've already filed," I said. Her face went completely still. "The house is in my name," I continued. "You'll have time to pack your things." "Please," she started. I shook my head. "No." Not loud. Not angry. Just final. I walked past her, down the hallway, and stopped at the doorway of that room. She followed. Of course she did. I stepped inside. She stayed just behind me. The crib sat there, exactly as I built it. Perfect. Unused. "I made this with my own hands," I said quietly. She started crying again. For a child that was never mine. I turned to her. Met her eyes one last time. But here's the thing, I added. My voice didn't shake. You didn't just lie about the child. I took a slow breath. You lied about who you were. Silence. Then I stepped back, walked out of the room. And this time, I didn't look back. Because at 53, I finally understood something I should have learned years ago. Not every second chance is a gift. Some are just better lies. And this time, I chose the truth.